What if I told you that in trying to protect itself, America may have pushed away one of its most important friends for the 21st century? I'm talking about India. You see, the global economy, it's not just about numbers on a spreadsheet. It's about relationships, it's about trust, and it's about influence. And in today's Explainer, we're going to unpack how a massive trade war completely reshaped those relationships and what it really cost everyone involved. So let's get into it. So this is the big question at the heart of our story today. I mean, this whole tariff war was supposed to rebalance the global stage, right? But what if, in the process, it actually cost the U.S. a key partner in the Indo-Pacific? Let's dig into the evidence and see exactly how this whole thing unfolded and what the real fallout was. All right, so where did this all begin? Well, the first shot was really fired back in early 2018. The U.S. administration, citing national security, slapped a 25% tariff on steel and a 10% tariff on aluminum imports. Now, this wasn't just some small, targeted move. No, this was the opening salvo in what would become a much, much bigger global conflict. And you can really see this conflict evolve in a few distinct phases. First, from 2018 to 2019, you have those initial moves, including that critical decision to yank India's special trade benefits. Then things kind of went quiet for a few years. But in 2025, boom, a massive escalation. Tariffs hit levels we haven't seen in over a century. It was like a slow burn that just suddenly exploded into a wildfire. Okay, so what was the point of all this? Well, on paper, there were four clear goals. The administration wanted to shrink the trade deficit, protect American manufacturing jobs, push back against what it saw as unfair trade practices, and, of course, make sure the U.S. had its own supply of critical materials. Now, you're going to want to keep these goals in mind because we're going to circle back to them and see if any of it actually worked. So let's move on to the global reaction, because here's the thing. These tariffs didn't just hit rivals. They sent a massive shockwave across the entire world. And pretty soon, some of America's closest allies found themselves caught right in the crosshairs. And let me tell you, the response was swift, and it was not friendly. Now, the main event, of course, was the U.S. versus China. This turned into a straight-up tit-for-tat slugfest, with tariffs climbing to absolutely staggering heights. We're talking up to 145% on Chinese goods, and China hit back hard, with tariffs up to 125%. This wasn't just a simple trade dispute anymore. This was an all-out economic war. But look who else got hit. The European Union, a key partner for decades, got slapped with 30% tariffs. Even Canada and Mexico, neighbors with a brand new trade deal, weren't safe. So the really crucial point here is that this America-first approach started to crack the very foundation of the global trade system. You can see it right there in the numbers. The amount of trade happening under WTO rules dropped a lot. And this quote from Mark Carney, wow, it just perfectly captures how deeply that trust was shattered. For generations, the world had looked to the United States to lead the way on the economy, and this statement was basically a signal that, in the eyes of many of America's closest friends, that era was just over. Okay, so that's the big picture. Now let's zoom in on the real core of our story, India. The U.S.-India relationship, people were calling it the defining partnership of the 21st century. But this tariff war put that relationship under some serious pressure, and it forced India to start rethinking its entire game plan. And if you were a policymaker sitting in New Delhi, this is the kind of chart that would have made your jaw hit the floor. By 2025, India, a major strategic partner, was facing a massive 50% tariff. And at the exact same time, its regional rival, Pakistan, was getting much better treatment, with tariffs at only 19%. Diplomatically speaking, that sends a very loud and very alarming signal. And this wasn't just about feelings. The economic pain was very, very real. We're talking billions of dollars in key Indian exports, steel, textiles, jewelry, all suddenly facing these enormous tariffs. And on top of that, remember when the U.S. withdrew India's special trade status back in 2019? Well, that took away benefits for almost $6 billion in trade. This was a huge blow to some of India's most important industries. But here's the thing about India. They didn't just sit there and take it. They responded, but they did it methodically. They played it smart. They used official channels like the WTO. They planned out their own counter tariffs, and most importantly, they started a major push to stop relying so much on the U.S. market. It was time to find new friends and strengthen old alliances. And you can see that pivot right here in the data. Trade with Russia skyrocketed, mostly because of oil. They deepened their cooperation with Japan on tech and defense, And they signed a brand new trade deal with the UK. See, this wasn't just a simple reaction. This was a fundamental strategic realignment. India was actively building a world where it had more options. Okay, so let's bring this all together. Let's look at the real price tag for this whole policy. Did the tariffs actually achieve what they set out to do, or did they just create a whole new mess of problems? It's time to weigh the final strategic cost. And here it is, the punchline. Remember, one of those primary goals was to reduce the U.S. trade deficit? Well, by the first quarter of 2025, that deficit had ballooned to $394 billion, the highest it had been in 17 years. So the policy didn't just fail, it actually had the complete opposite effect. So, what are the big takeaways from all this? Well, for the U.S., the lesson is pretty clear. If you go it alone, you risk damaging the very alliances you need to win. For India, it was a huge wake-up call that having strategic autonomy, the freedom to make your own choices, is absolutely critical. And for the rest of the world, it proved that sometimes just the constant uncertainty of a trade war can be even more damaging than the tariffs themselves. Which leaves us with this one big fundamental question. In today's incredibly complex world, what's the real currency of power? Is it just about economic muscle? Or is it about the trust you build between nations over decades? It's something to think about.